and welcome to Hospice Insights, the Law and Beyond, where we connect you to what matters in the ever-changing world of hospice and palliative care.
One size doesn't fit all. Figuring out what is your Hospice Plus. So, Brian, we should trademark Hospice Plus, I feel like, because we've been using it a lot. Hospice Plus. You came up with that.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And this, I have to say, you titled this episode, and I'm jealous. This is a great title. But yeah, every time we say Hospice Plus in this episode, I will sneak in a little TM just to protect ourselves, the intellectual property we're generating.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or, because we haven't trademarked it. So it could just be a BM because that's Brian and came up with it.
Yeah, it's a huge BM. I think we got to think of it that way. So
anyway,
going to change
Brian.
The BM that changed the world.
Yeah, exactly. Hospice Plus. So, but all kidding aside here, what we really wanted to explore in this episode, because Brian, you and I do presentations with boards, and I'm involved in a lot of restructuring projects with clients, and all of that's about strategic vision for the future and what that looks like. And I think that what I wanted to achieve in this episode, I'm very outcome orientated here, laying out what my goals are, was I think it can be really intimidating as a leader. You go to these conferences and everyone's talking about, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And you feel like you need to do what everyone else is doing and sort of follow the herd, so to speak. And I mean, I truly believe people have to change. Like there needs to be a pivot. That's why we came up with Hospice Plus. But like we're not going to be the one trick pony. But I don't think what is our plus is going to be the same thing for everyone because the strengths are different, your market's different. And so I just want to put that on the table because I think in talking with people all over the country, I think there's anxiety around like, well, so-and-so's doing this and I need to do that. And we saw that, a decade ago when people are doing palliative care and you go to this conference and sort of be confused because like, oh, they're providing all these free services. And then they talk to me and I'm like, well, you need to consider beneficiary inducement and other things. So um, I, I want to, and we're not going to talk about every single, Hospice Plus idea, but I just think having a framework and I think being okay with it might not make sense to do what the other guy's doing. And you got to really go back to what your strengths are, what your market is. And importantly, and we're going to explore this a little bit more about what bring your board around. Because I think in talking to boards, there's a little bit fatigue I hear so for a long time, people have been trying to get palliative care off the ground, and it's been challenging because there's not a lot of income streams, revenue streams from that. That's changing a bit. But people might say, well, the last time you came and you wanted to explore, expanding in this area, we lost a ton of money. And, I don't want to go down that path again. And I think it's like, but just because that one thing didn't work out, I think the board needs to realize that there's opportunity out there and we can't just say, well, this was a money loser. We're not going to ever do anything different. Again, we're just going to stick with the Medicare hospice benefit and let it be. So I just talked a lot, Brian, because I'm passionate about this, but
yes.
I just feel anxiety for people who feel like I got to do what everyone else is doing. And I think the fun work that we get to do is to say, take a breath and go back to your strengths and doing your SWOT analysis and what makes sense for you in particular. But Brian, as we've put together these different board presentations and talking with folks, I think where we start out is, where we've been is not where we're going. And so we have like past, present, future stuff that we talk about. And, there's a couple different highlights that I think are pretty interesting in there. The one that comes to mind for me is we've had, hospice has gotten very mainstream and we've had, growth because now I think what is it, 49% of Medicare beneficiaries die on hospice now. I mean, it's gone up steadily, but it's only a couple percentage points over like the last 5 years or something.
Yeah, it was 44% in 2010, 49.1% in 2022, which is 2022 is like the most recent kind of vetted data that they put out about that. Yeah, that's increasing the percentage, not a super dramatic increase, but it's going up definitely.
And it's steady, but, betting on that number, are we going to, get to 75 or 80%? Probably not, because, sometimes people die suddenly or, and that's sort of what Hospice Plus is about is how can we get upstream and care for people, whether or not they ever go on hospice, right? And being able to serve uh, um, people sort of where they are when they and so but buying other highlights, I think as we've been doing the looking back, looking forward sort of statistics.
Yeah, well, we have seen some things, change, and sometimes some things stay the same. That median length of stay on hospice has been at 17 to 18 days for over a decade, which I think a lot in the hospice space say that shows underutilization of hospice. We're not getting people on hospice soon enough. If they're only getting 17 to 18 days worth of what is designed to be really a 6-month benefit. Now we know CMS doesn't look at that end; they look at the other end of the bell
Yeah.
curve, and they see the patients who are on for 3 years or 5 years or whatever, and say, well, at all costs, we've got to stop that from happening. But I think when you see the median length of stay being that low, and you look at it in the context of the rising utilization, baby boomers coming on, and maybe that's a prospect. You kind of look for the opportunities within the data. And I think kind of touching upon your introductory comments, if you go to these conferences and you just say, I'm going to kind of hitch my wagon to the latest and greatest, uh, you're missing a step, which is a lot of self-reflection, a lot of assessing yourself, assessing the data in your market and the market at large, and not thinking that what worked for somebody else is going to work for you. I'm sure there was the first hospice to really invest themselves in palliative care and have success, and that was great for them. But maybe the next best thing to come along is going to be something that works for you that is different. Get involved in geriatric primary care, something like that, which you're going to make that the next top topic, and people are going to want to follow in your footsteps. So following in footsteps is risky in itself. So kind of what we're talking about now, what's the data around there and how can we see the opportunities in the data? That's where the work is done.
Well, and I think working with boards and being part of this process and being the fly in the wall and getting to hear what people say. I mean, starting with how can I be of service is really the question that we're asking. What does my community need? What do my community partners need? Not what do I want to do, right? I think that it's very much of an outward looking view, not what do I want to do, but how can I be of service? Now, we need to stay in our lane to a certain extent because this needs to be guided by, well, what are my strengths and my skills? And I think when we look at that, we have a lot of strengths and skills. We're good at having difficult conversations. We have staff that are great at that. We can manage to a budget because we've always been paid on a per diem. We, from a client service perspective, typically most people have very good hospice experiences. So customer satisfaction and it is really good. I mean, there's lots of things that we have strengths that can be applied in different ways. So I think starting with that, how can I be of service? What does my community need? What do my community partners need? You know, and also with payers, what do they need to help with problem solving sort of idea, as opposed to just, oh, I heard, some hospices are setting up a management services organization. So I'm going to do that too. And I'm going to, do a JV with the hospital because I heard someone else is doing that, or, whatever. I think getting back to, um, you know, uh, what our community needs of us is really important, because I think when you start there, you might end up in different places. Uh, so
And I think outreach is something that you should embrace. You can go so far to try to figure out, well, what does my community need? What do the other healthcare providers in the community need? But you kind of do your homework to a certain extent, and then engage with those other folks and find out directly from them, what do they need? Here's what we can offer, part of it or examples. But what do you need? Because we think we can come together and provide, whether it's want better outcomes, you want to, like you said, we're good at staying within a budget with the per diem, want better quality readings from patients, reduced costs, want to try to reduce your costs. I think hospices can have a really effective way about going about reducing costs. And bereavement. So, bereavement care, that's kind of something that hospices engage in. And just kind of looking at articles, they're partnering with schools, partnering with other healthcare providers about bereavement care. Looking at your skill set and then saying, how is this helpful to others in the community? And then, communicate with those other folks in the community and try to come together with, what is it that we can offer that you need, and we will try to fill that need.
but importantly, we have to make money doing this, right? And
Of
so,
course, yeah.
but I am also a huge brainstormer. So I think getting all these ideas out on the table, but then we have to have the lens from which we evaluate all of these, which is one thing I think is critical is we desperately need to be diversified from a payer source standpoint. So hospice, I think, more than, most provider types, are so heavily Medicare focused. So going into another business line that, like, all of your revenue is Medicare might not be the best thing, right? And because we all know that's why audits hit hospices so hard, because if they're going to audit you and they do statistical extrapolation, they can, apply that to 90% plus of your revenue, right? Because it's all mostly Medicare. So I think thinking about, okay, of all these great ideas we have and problems we want to solve, how can we get paid doing this? And is it something other than Medicare? And can we provide this with all of the staff shortages that we have and all this? Who can do this service? Because if we already are short staffed on nurses for hospice, getting into a super nurse heavy business, is that going to necessarily be possible given the staffing realities we have? And also thinking about how we could leverage technology in providing some of this service too. So the lens is, that's a great idea, but I'm not going to be able to staff that. I can barely staff, my hospice, much less, another service line. Um, but I think, so when we explore like adult daycare with folks, right? You don't necessarily need nurses to do that. And you don't necessarily maybe even need CNAs to do that, depending on that. So thinking about the staffing realities of doing that, you know, can I get paid to do this? So like bereavement, great mission focus, but can we really get paid to do that. And it's not that we don't do that, but in terms of Hospice Plus and how are we expanding our revenue streams and creating, a diversified platform. So we are here to serve the community for another 100 years, right? And that's what we need, like a 10-pronged stool. Right now we have one pronged stool if all you're doing is hospice, right? And so we need at least two other legs, right? I don't think there's a two-legged chair. There's a three-legged chair.
Not a good one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
3 legs is the minimum.
yeah. So, or a pogo stick, I guess. You could, like hospice is a pogo stick.
Yes.
But
we could move to stilts, but that's still pretty precarious.
Yes.
So you need that third leg out
there. So we have, what staff do I need to have to do this? Is it a diversified payer source? Does it align with strengths that I already have? Can I use technology? Can't remember, Brian, some of the other things we have on our list as sort of filters or lenses, so to speak, of things that you should be looking at. Because again, I think we want to do, with groups of people within our organization and our board of lots of different ideas. But then we need to filter this down into what actually makes sense. And so these were some filters you and I came up with when we were doing a presentation.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is, startup costs. Is this something you start on your own? Can you acquire an entity that's already out there to kind of complement what you're doing? So you don't have the expertise, buy the expertise, and maybe the two in combination are two, 1 + 1 = 3. In other words, you kind of take advantage of combining a couple to provide even more opportunities for yourself. So yeah.
Well, and I think that we've seen and worked on transactions of like home health companies, geriatric primary care. I mean, we've also worked with clients and starting those up from scratch. We've also have had clients who started a home health agency that sort of went dormant and they restarted it. So sometimes when you start things, it actually wasn't the right time to do that. And now maybe it is. And so you bring it back. Or, like you said, you buy it. Because if you can find someone who's doing a really good job in this space, there's no pride in this whole, I got to do it myself, right? I mean, I think that there can be a real benefit to buying other people's expertise. And I think an exciting part of palliative care these days is that I do think people and payers in particular, including non-Medicare payers or Medicare Advantage payers of palliative care, right, isn't really well defined. I always say it's defined by what you can get paid to do. And I think we're getting paid to do more, or there more money about if that parlays into chronic care management or case management services or supportive care. But we also know that people want to age in place. And again, that totally aligns with something we're great at, which is going into people's homes and providing that as a place of service. And so I think that that is so critical because that's probably one of the number one things when people age, that they want to age in place and they want to age at home. No one wants to, go to a nursing home. Most folks don't want to die in a hospital if they don't have to. And so that is such a great strength because it's pretty complicated to provide care in the home. And I think we take for granted that we've sort of mastered that. But a lot of lessons learned, like for the hospital at home model, right? Like that was a whole new thing that started during COVID that CMS, I think, saw some real benefits to. There was a report that just came about some of the benefits of hospital at home, but everything is moving to the home, and so that being the place of service, and I think that's not cut out private pay. So assisted living in large part is all private pay dollars, right? So I think we've always said, well, we can't do this if we have to charge the patient. There needs to be a payer source. But people are paying out of pocket for assisted living services. So, there are opportunities that people will pay for certain services. And like, for example, case management services, checking in on people, seeing how they're doing, assistance with tasks around the house. I mean, there's a whole lot of different things that people need help with and that people have funds to pay for it themselves privately, even if insurance doesn't cover it. So,
Yeah, and I think that's why we're a little cautious about utilization. It's just going to keep going up and up and up. That's not necessarily the case. That's not what patients necessarily want to always end on hospice for an extended stay. I mean, they might want to have one of these alternative healthcare delivery systems working for them for a longer term that they get comfortable with. And who are those entities who are currently doing that? How can we leverage their expertise into ours? So, kind of looking at providers as competitors, but also potential collaborators, is something to be open minded about. And I think with a lot of the analysis is really come to it with an open mind. Don't really rule anything out as you're trying to figure out what are the opportunities out there. Finding that diverse payer source, diverse payers, it would be a huge boon, mitigating a lot of the risk that we see all the time. And like you said, I think those payers are out there. The market wants something, and maybe they need someone to define what it is that they need. So we talked about filling the need, but also creating the need, or at least identifying, hey, this would be attractive to a lot of people. They just don't know it yet. That's another way to look at what are the opportunities that could be available.
well, and like in my life, not just my lawyer life, but perspective is so important. Like, you're a better person if you go and talk to other people about what they think about stuff, right? And so I think making sure as we're exploring these things that we have different constituencies that we talk to about this stuff because just because, I'm the CEO doesn't mean my ideas are the best ideas or that I have all of the ideas, right? And so when we're coming at it from how can I be of service? What does my community need? Let's not interject and say, I know what that is before I even ask the question. And so I think sometimes when planning gets to be ineffective, and I'm not saying, this goes on and on and on, but I think not just having the same five people sit around the table who drink the same Kool-Aid because you're not going to have diversity of thought. Um, and it's different people, including, as you said, like who's going to be our consumer and what do they need? What problems are they trying to solve and whatnot? And I think that there has been a lot of interest in PACE. I feel like over the last number of years, which is an amazing program, but talk about like financial investment, Brian, you were saying, on our list of filters, like how much does this take to get off the ground? Like starting an adult day care program, balancing that with like essentially starting up a PACE program where I have to have a really expensive building. I have to have so much cash. And I mean, I got to, have additional expertise on my team because it's, now I'm sort of a payvider, right? I'm being a payer and I'm a provider and I got to deal with paying claims. I mean, it's a big undertaking, really exciting. But I don't think that just because you're not doing PACE, like there's not a whole lot that we could be doing to be of service. And when you think about it, a lot of your competitors might just be doing as I always say, the one trick pony hospice, and they're not really in these other spaces. But so it's another way that you can compete. But I always like going back to the how can I be of service, asking people what they need, and then figuring out, does that align with my skill set and all these other sort of filters that we have. And Brian, we could probably take a couple of those from some of the presentations we've done, a few of those slides, and include them on the podcast notes, just to, because we've covered sort of a lot here, but what those filters are, I think could be helpful for folks.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think we could do that. We have some data on the market out there that might be helpful to kind of get the conversation going within your hospice about kind of how do we look at this data, look at these filters, and start to think about what value we can add to the community and what payers we can attract or locate. And I think in these kinds of discussions where there's a lot of brainstorming, it really requires creativity. It's good to have a diverse board, a lot of different backgrounds, in different, business community, healthcare community, just kind of retired citizens, whoever, but combine it with hospice staff people and get all that perspective and kind of bringing those groups together so that they can kind of just enhance the arena of ideas that you can start to share. And in that brainstorming, it really can become more effective.
Well, this is stuff I love to do, and I love being, because I learn a ton when we get to work on these kinds of projects. And I think when we did our Gallup strength assessment on our team, I think like learning is my number one thing that I love to do. So, so I always learn from our clients, and it's a lot of fun, and it makes me better at my job being a lawyer. So when I get
I'm all about relationships, as you know, from that same personality survey. Who would have thought?
Yeah. So yeah, that sure was interesting. Our Gallup strength assessment thing. But so well, this was a fun conversation and something I'm super passionate about. And so I guess it's like legal adjacent because we work all over the country. So I see lots of different things about how people approach things. And so I'm always happy to be part of board conversations. So call me up, and I'm happy to do that. And it's the most fun thing I get to do. So I could start doing it for free, Brian. I almost like it that much.
Well, that's cut off the tape.
But it's really it's fun to be part of the future in that way. So anyway, thanks for letting me do a lot of the talking today, Brian. I get overzealous. We've worked together a long time. So I can't fake it. When I'm passionate about it, Brian.
Oh, absolutely.
I just go off. So
no, and I just like to listen when you're passionate about something. You have so much good to say. I just try to take it all in, contribute where I can.
So thanks we almost like flipped it there. You were almost like host and I was like guest. So, but it wasn't. I let you interject, so it wasn't a total monologue. But
oh no, I contributed.
Thank you. And right. Until next time.
Very good. Thanks, Meg.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Hospice Insights, The Law and Beyond. Thank you for joining the conversation. To subscribe to our podcast, visit our website at hushblackwell.com or sign up wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, may the wind be at your back.